Cum D. Anyway, stuff. I've lost you.
No, you haven't.
Okay. So from what I can see, there was a communist party in South Wales.
Oh, hang on. There certainly was. This is really good stuff, because did you know that South Wales was very close, the closest ever to electing a communist MP. We were the hotbed of communism. And then you tell me what you've learned about.
Well, it all started to make my uncle, right, who was a Jew, was also a communist, but this was in the 50s. He bought a farm. He actually made, he made his money through the farm, but he was a socialist.
Tell
that's
me that
in the 50s. Pardon?
Tell me that again. You got an uncle that was Jewish.
My father's cousin, actually, Auntie Marion, Auntie Mars, we used to call her. She was brilliant. She even went to the CND marches in the 80s. They both died now in the noughties. Anyway, so Uncle Alf was an East London Jew. Yeah. My aunt, of course, that didn't go down too well because she wasn't Jewish.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's sort of the family story and they had a farm in Devorden near Chepstow, which we would go to as on a Sunday. It was great.
Yeah.
They were great people. And he was a socialist and gave money to the Socialist Party. But that's all I kind of know about it.
Yeah, no, the communism was massive in South Wales. It really was. It was a hotbed of left-wing agitation. And when we look at the Spanish Civil War, it was the place to be. We're looking at names involved in the Spanish Civil War, which we're talking about people. This is the place to be if you want to send people to the Spanish Civil War.
If you're a communist.
Yeah. But let's do some balance. There were people on the other side as well, as we've already mentioned. Last week, what we mentioned, obviously, we got the Spanish Civil War. It's hitting off in July 1936, the 17th of July 1936. It ends on the 1st of April 1939. And the biggest thing that we can say is that the sense of communism doesn't die in South Wales with the death of communism in this, with the result of the Spanish Civil War. With the end of the Spanish Civil War in 1939, when Franco's Phalangists actually take over, the fascist Phalangists actually take over Spain. Right. So, what else have you learned about these our volunteers?
Well, that was kind of it, really. The Wales, which I didn't know, was this, as you said, a hotbed for communism in the 1930s, but it was before that as well. I photocopied a couple of pages from the book, and I was going to give it further reading.
No, you should give it further reading, because it's those it's those volunteers that sort of change the map, right? They created their own British battalion, and in some ways, the International Brigade was welcomed in Spain by the Republicans, but eventually they started to get in the way. In fact, they started to be sent home because things were getting really bad, and the last thing they wanted was more volunteers that they couldn't look after.
So I've got to quote you. Most of the 118 from the mining valleys election, most valleys who fought on the Republican side in the Spanish Civil War, went under the aegis of the Communist Party.
Their
heroism and sacrifice are not to be gainsaid, but once more it has been endowed retrospectively with a weightiness that it did not have in its own day. But prior to that, we've got Plaid Cymru, was a response to the soft cultural or sentimental nationalism of the Edwardian era, but it remained a culture group until after 1945 with no discernible influence on Welsh politics.
But that's nothing to do with what we're doing. But
no, okay, so that was something else.
But
that bit about the Spanish War.
It was called the 15th International Brigade. It was a British battalion, but it didn't. Most of it didn't last the end of the war. They were basically out of there by the end of 1938. So the war continued into
the National Brigade. Right. Sorry, who were they?
Oh, the 16th. But basically, the 16th Battalion of the 15th International Brigade, right? The British battalion. So basically, what we're talking about. It's a battalion making up a brigade, right? So the volunteers from Britain were only one set of the volunteers from other countries. There were volunteers from France. Can you imagine the case that there were volunteers from everywhere? Really, there were communists from Russia in their own battalion within these brigades, and there were Irish volunteers. There were German volunteers that were involved in the International Brigade, and it was just that the Irish were really interesting because the Irish actually sided with both sides, because the Irish were anti-British, and they saw the British Brigade that
was that. Or the whole of Ireland, or just a section of north or south? Ireland been split?
No. It was split. It was split throughout. It was split throughout the whole thing, right? Because the Irish provided both for the Republicans and the Nationalists. But one of the things I was looking at was that the volunteers that actually came from Ireland, that was supporting the nationalists, which are the Phalangist fascists and on the side of Germany and the Portuguese as well. The Portuguese were supporting the nationalists, so the country alongside Spain was nationalist. They were supporting Franco, but remember, Franco was just a general at this stage. He was just the one who eventually became the leader.
Right.
It wasn't a normal civil war, and one of the things. And actually, after a time, this is a very important point. After a time, the Irish volunteers that supported the nationalists. Okay, get this straight. We had the Republican Irish that supported the International Brigade, the Republicans, right? That was fine, but the nationalists that actually supported eventually Franco and the Phalangists, they become disheartened because it was not the war that they wanted to be involved in. It was not. They thought they were going into a nationalist struggle, not a fascist struggle. There's a difference, right?
Yes.
There's a key difference between nationalism and fascism, right? And maybe I should discuss this for a little bit.
I think so, because it's a key point, isn't it?
The thing is, right, for example, Plaid Cymru used to be accused once of being fascist orientated, right? They're no longer classed as that. They're clearly nationalist. But the political party Gwlad was thought to be supporters of fascism because they were quite right wing, right? But that's not the case. That's clearly not the case because, as you know, we're both candidates. But the fact of the matter is, this is exactly what happened with the Irish. They thought, we're nationalists. We believe in an independent Ireland. Franco believes in an independent sort of nationalist Spain, but they didn't. The Irish nationalists didn't like what was going on. They didn't like the direction, so they started pulling out. They started thinking we don't want anything to do with this, and so this shows the real split in Ireland. But the thing is, the weird thing is that the people who actually supported both the nationalist and Republican cause were actually members of Sinn Féin. And Sinn Féin, strangely enough, is a Republican political but nationalist party. So it's just trying to work things out. What Sinn Féin in Ireland wants is an independent Ireland united together, right? Which is classed as nationalism, but they're a Republican party. You see the issue that we've got here.
Yeah, they want an independent Ireland that's united.
Yeah, so they're technically, that means that's a sense of nationalism, but they believe in republicanism. What republicanism is? Anti-monarchy. Yeah. Now, interesting enough, supporting the nationalists were the monarchists in Spain. So when those so what you've got to do is think of this, right? You've got to make it really simple, right? You've got in 1936, you've got people from Ireland supporting both the Republican and the nationalist cause, right? The Republican cause is easy to work out because those volunteers coming from Ireland are involved on the Republican cause in a Republican political party called Sinn Féin and that type of movement, right? But Sinn Féin wanted a united Ireland, which could be classed as nationalistic, right? So then when you go to the other hand, are those volunteers from Ireland involved in a nationalist cause, they thought that's what they were fighting for, right? But it turned out that they were fighting for something very, very different. So they were in the trenches alongside people who actually supported the Spanish king. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, I'm in this trench on the nationalist cause, and you're a monarchist? That doesn't work.
Makes sense.
It doesn't make sense. So you've got a conflict. So in other words, I'm not putting words in the mouth of those supporting Franco. Franco, what Franco did, he just decided he was going to become a fascist. It was just a fashionable thing to do. In Europe at that time, you were either, well, this is actually completely wrong, but if you were in Europe, not in Britain, right? We had democracy here, right? And forget France. If you forget France and you forget Britain, you had, which were democratic, and Britain was democratic, and obviously lots of other countries in Europe were democratic, but we can't really talk about Czechoslovakia, and we can't really talk about Poland or anything like that. What we've got to do, we've got to be in Spain, and we've got to sit down as Franco, and he's a general, right? So he's non-political, and somebody says, right, you're either on the communist side or you're on the other side, right? Which happened to be fascist. Well, he couldn't be on the communist side because he was fighting communism. So he had to be fascist. That's the only option he had. Yeah. And this is the thing, you see, the fascist side in Ireland was a mixture of Catholics. Now, this was the thing. Now, this is the conflict again, right? Can you see what we've just done there? The volunteers in Ireland were told, right, the nationalists, supporting the nationalist side are, right, supporting the nationalist side in Ireland are Catholics, right? You don't know about the monarchists, but they're Catholics. And you're thinking, oh, I'm a nationalist. I want to support the Catholic side. So you've got a Catholic on the one side, and he's saying, oh, look what I'm doing. And then you've got somebody saying, oh, but I'm a fascist. And this volunteer from Ireland is confused. And what then kicks it? Oh, we're monarchists. And he's thinking, there's four of us in a trench, right? One of them's a Catholic who's my friend in Ireland, right? Yeah, Spanish Catholic. He would be my friend in Ireland. You've got a monarchist, and he's thinking, you wouldn't be my friend in Ireland because I can't stand the monarchy in Ireland. And then you've got a fascist that can't stand the fascist. So in other words, those volunteers from Ireland were really screwed up on the nationalist side. But then again, Rosamund, you've got the other problem. Those volunteers on the Republican side who were fighting the nationalists, they were Catholic, right? Fighting Catholics. Do you see what do you see the problem? So in other words, you could, what I've done there, I turned it around, right? So I've given you the reasons why the nationalists in Ireland wanted to pull out. But I've also, and now we're on to the other side of the coin. We've got volunteers on the Republican side who are Catholics fighting, finally finding out that the church that you've just blown up is a Catholic church, and you're a Catholic. And now you're thinking, I'm fighting on the Republican side. I don't want to do this anymore because I've just killed a Catholic and I'm a Catholic.
Yeah.
So in other words, fighting in Ireland for the fighting in Spain for the Irish was not the thing to do. It just didn't work. It just didn't work politically, right? So what I would like to do is a little bit more of a step, right? In Germany, this we're going to go to Germany now, right? This is the same problem that was happening in Germany, right? There was this problem with religion in Germany, right? In the 1930s. And Germany, this is also A-level stuff. Germany had its own, as Nazism was growing in Germany, right? They had their own church. They had their own Christian church. But they were also opposed in Germany to Catholic Christians, right? So Protestant Christians, a type of Protestantism, supported the Nazi party, and Catholic Christianity supported whoever else. So Christianity in Europe just didn't fit at that stage. If you want to say, right, Christianity in 1936 was dead because it didn't make sense anymore. Because you had, in other words, you had Christianity did not work with anything in Europe. Christianity did. That's the other thing as well, is in communist Russia, right? There is no Christianity. It's atheist, right? So in communist Russia, there is no religion, right? So you've got these volunteers from Ireland who are Catholic fighting on your side in the Republican trenches against a communist who did not believe in Catholicism.
Yeah.
So no longer does Christianity work in Europe. It doesn't fit the bill.
But there's still a lot of Catholicism there, isn't there? Mm.
And actually, weirdly enough, this is going to blow your mind, right? In Germany, some Catholic priests were helping the Jews escape from Germany because the Jews were going to the camps, right?
Yeah.
But in Italy, the Catholics were not doing anything to stop the Germans as Germany occupied Italy in 1943. The Catholics were not doing anything to stop this going on with the Jews. So you see what you've got. I'm not having a go at Christianity at all.
No, this is very problematic, isn't it? In that you've got to take yourself out of it a bit.
Yes.
And see it from the bigger angles and what was going in where.
Yeah, what was going on.
But it is quite emotive stuff in a lot of respects as well, isn't it?
It is emotive stuff. So what I'm going to say, we got, what I want to do is, I got Evan waiting there.
Okay, that's all right.
Oh,
Carl.
No, what we'll do another 3 minutes because I want to show you, okay. I want to show you a couple of images because we'll do another 20 minutes after the boys, right? Yeah, and then and then any extra stuff we can catch up again, right? But what I want to do is I want to get your mind thinking, right? I want to, because what we need to do, we need to start doing the other side. We need to start doing communism, right? But I want to do a little bit of Mussolini and a little bit of Stalin after when we come back after your break, which is going to be an hour, right?
Oh, that's okay. I'm here.
Right, so I'm just going to screen share this. It just gives you food for thought, right? And it's trying to get your neck around it, right? So what we've got is we've got hang on, this image. We're looking at what was going on with Italy, right? This is Mussolini's empire. Right? Can you see this?
Yes.
In as of 1941, Italy controlled this area, right? It had already conquered. Conquered Ethiopia. At that stage, Italy was already in charge of Libya. It was in charge of Italy itself. If Italy had stayed out the Second World War, it'd still be in control of the red bits, right?
Right. Okay.
Because it already controlled Ethiopia before the outbreak of war, right? It controlled roads, for example, the red area. It controlled Italy. It controlled Libya. It controlled all these areas. Where as it entered the war, it tried to keep hold of the pink areas. And guess what? By 1943, it was only in charge of a little bit of Africa and Italy itself. The worst mistake Italy did was to enter the Second World War on the side of Adolf Hitler. If it stayed out of the Second World War, it would have probably remained in control for some years, but eventually Italy would have been thrown out of power. Here's a little bit of a fact, right? A little bit of a fact. This is you need to get your mind around this, right? As much as Mussolini had been in charge of Italy for quite some time, we'll look at the dates after the break, right? He'd been in charge of Italy for quite some time until he was deposed by his own king in 1943. But when I say he was deposed by his own king, his own fascist party said that we don't want you to be in charge of us anymore, right? They handed him to the king, and he was imprisoned by the king that they asked. His own party handed Mussolini over to the king to be imprisoned, right? In other words, Mussolini wasn't a proper fascist. Fascist are people, right? I'm in charge, you're not, right? He was a democratic fascist, which doesn't work. Can you imagine if Adolf Hitler was a democratic fascist? Adolf Hitler was not a fascist. He was a Nazi, big difference. He was a National Socialist, Adolf Hitler, right? The interesting thing about Mussolini is he was, his own party said that we don't want you to be our leader anymore. And he was imprisoned. And Adolf Hitler had to get him out of prison. That's an interesting fact. So what we're going to do now, we're going to stop that now, and we're going to come back after the...
Good timing, because Thomas Ellis Evans has just reared his head. And I need to go and have a cup of tea with him. Tell him